Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio. Okay, welcome back, everybody. Okay, you have a close friend, and that close friend, you're sitting there, you're talking, and you discover that they decided to write out their will, their last testament, their wishes for how everything should be distributed after their final moments. And they turn and they look at you as like, and I would like you to participate in that by becoming the executor of my estate. And you're filled with joy and honor, and because your friend loves you that much, they would ask you to do this. But the big question is, do you really know what it means? Do you know what you're taking on? And can you do it without getting help? And our next guest, David Edey, he's going to explain to you that you probably don't know what you're taking on, and that you probably need a boatload of a team to help you out so that you can carry out your friend's final wishes if they do pass and leave you to do the job that they asked you to do. So let's listen to what David has to say in this next interview. Welcome to the show, David. It was great meeting you a few weeks ago on LinkedIn, and getting you to come on the show, because this being an executor or having help people settle estates, that's important work, you know. So why don't you tell us about
difficult. First off, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, go ahead.
First off, thanks for having me on the show, Michael. I appreciate it. Taking on the job which is probably the worst job that anyone could take. It's probably the worst job in the world, is being an executor, because it's such a tough job. And if you take on the responsibility, or you're asked to take on the responsibility, first thing you have to understand, you don't have to take on the job. You could say no, but a lot of people take it on as they're doing this giant favor, for someone who's either a close friend or a family member, to take on that responsibility to be their executor. But they also have to go into the knowing the job with their eyes wide open, knowing that they're going to spend them over 100 hours to settle the estate, or it could take another 18 to 24 months. So you need to know what's involved and how to get prepared, and understand that it's not an easy task. It's not an easy job.
Yeah. Well, and of course, your book is called Executor Help, and it believe it or not, is actually on the shelf next to him.
Right. Yeah. So the full name is, and it's how I ended up writing the book. It's called Executor Help: How to Settle an Estate, Pick an Executor, and Avoid Family Fights. And it's written based on my experience of being an executor, and it took, in my case, it was 7 years, 10 court appearances, and $50,000 to settle my parents' estate, and they had a will. So I didn't want anybody to go through what I went through, because every time I would talk about it to people that were executors, or people, families that were breaking up, they were, going through what I went through during that time period. I would be sharing my experiences. People would tell me, how difficult it was. So during COVID, I didn't want anybody else to have to go through what I did, so I decided to write the book.
Yeah. So you said it cost you $50,000 to settle the estate. Why did it cost $50,000 even though they had a will?
Well, that's because what my parents should have done, because there were three beneficiaries, three children, and even though my parents did have a will, one thing they didn't do was have a conversation with us to explain what they had done and how they wanted the estate to be split three ways. And for some people, they, equal is never fair. So we ended up having to go to court because one sibling decided that they wanted to make the estate more in their favor and wanted more of a share, even though it was split three ways. So we ended up having to go to court.
Wow. Now, I heard from my niece. My brother-in-law recently died, and these squabbles happen because they're fighting over who's supposed to purchase the headstone for his grave.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't laid out how the money was supposed to be allocated for the headstone for his grave.
Yeah, that's common because, first off, what we're talking about is probably the least sexiest topic that you're going to have on your show. And that's because a lot of people are afraid to talk about the subject of death. So they're afraid, so they avoid it. They procrastinate and put off, talking about wills or estate planning, executor, all this sort of stuff. They avoid it, or they take the thought that, well, I'm going to be dead. It's not going to be my problem. When actually, if you don't do anything and you resist the one thing that we all have, it's going to happen in our lives, you now put your family in danger because now you're risking them being disorganized and in chaos. So in your case, when you're talking about with your niece there, where their family squabbling over the headstone, that could have easily been alleviated just by the testator or the person who owned the will had that conversation and let the executor know or let the family members know if something was to happen, this is what I want, or they put it in along with the will what they would want done. So there's no ambiguity, there's no confusion, there's no, well, this is what they want, and then somebody else says, well, no, I think this is what they want, and so there's no misinterpretation of what you would want. And again, that comes from, and that's where my parents fell down. They didn't have the conversations with the three of us.
Yeah. So, it's important for you, being the loved one, to have the conversation with everyone before you pass about, hey, this is what I'm thinking. This is what I want. That sort of thing, right?
Yeah. Well, a lot of times, the matriarch or the patriarch of the family, they're not going to have those conversations because they know the family dynamics of the family and they don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. Or there's going to be the thought, well, we all get along, at Christmas or Thanksgiving, we all get together, we laugh, we had a good time. It'll never be a problem. That's not our family. Nothing can be further from the truth. We all start out with the illusion that our family is perfect, but no family is perfect. So once we get that illusion out of the way, I like to say you never know about somebody until you have to share an inheritance with them. So we need to figure out, okay, how can we have that conversation and let people know, yes, it's uncomfortable, but you have that conversation with the family members. For example, we recently updated our will, or we did our will. We've named, whoever they named, maybe of the two children, they might have named one of them, or they might have named both, and they explain why they named them. These are my wishes. This is what I would like done. I don't want any. I would hope that the family will stay together and there won't be any fighting. But at least the wishes are out there, and you're trying to get people to understand what you want. So I'm not guaranteeing by just having the conversations in advance it's going to help. But there can't be any ambiguity in terms of, what did they mean? And now we're fighting over the estate, or this is what they would want. So you need to have the conversations because conversations do matter. But a lot of times people just let the paperwork do the talking, and they're afraid to have those conversations with the family.
So the paperwork is just one piece of the puzzle. You need to have the other pieces of the puzzle and sit down and talk.
Absolutely, because a lot of people think, well, once I have the will, I can just get it and forget it. But it's not. A will is just saying what you would like, but there's more to it than that. You can't put all your thoughts and wishes just in that piece of paper and then think that everybody's just going to abide by it or understand what you meant. So you should have the will. You should have the conversations. You should have the conversations and prepare your executor to let them know where the will is and other important documents such as your logins and your passwords, all of those things. And you also want to have the conversations with the beneficiaries. Let them know what your plans are and what your hopes are going forward. Again, we're trying to stay away from that ambiguity, that conversations, well, I think this is what they wanted. Have the conversations now. But unfortunately, we're not. A lot of families, they want to stay away from it because they want to just avoid or procrastinate, because a lot of times people think just having this conversation, talking about death, that you're bringing on something that you could actually something could happen. So what you're really doing is just making sure that your family is not left disorganized and in chaos.
Yeah, I know for myself because I volunteer at hospice, and I have friends who actually work in the funeral business, and there's a running joke: you're not going to get out of life alive.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I like to tell people, spoiler alert, we're all going to die. So it's not like it can be a surprise that this is going to happen.
Yeah.
But what you want to do is prepare to leave a legacy and not a legacy and a mess. A lot of times I ask people to think about what kind of legacy do you want to leave behind. And when I say a legacy isn't what you leave people, but it's how you leave them. Are they going to have pleasant thoughts about you? Are they going to be mad at you for things that you didn't do? Or would you want to be remembered for the things that you did do and how they've got more pleasant memories of you, and the family traditions can carry on from your legacy to the next generations.
Yeah. How you just define legacy is a beautiful way of looking at it. But also could be a terrifying way of looking at it.
Yeah.
And it takes way more thought than what would be just in a single document.
Yeah, the legacy. As much as I miss my parents, my mom's voice every day, we no longer own the assets that they own. And we haven't spent the holidays together since they passed away over a decade ago. And that's because there were no conversations. So you need to figure out, well, how do I want the family traditions, the name, the legacy to go on to the next generation. Statistically, it's been shown that 70% of inheritances don't make it to the second generation or even the third generation. There's probably nothing left, and that's because there aren't family discussions of things of how, whether it be investments or other legacies that are being left behind to be passed on to the next generation. How is it going to be done, and how is it done in an orderly fashion so that there's no infighting?
Yeah. One of the other thoughts that I've heard a few people say, well, I don't have anything anyway, so I don't need to have even bother with any type of a will or any discussion around how it should. There's nothing there anyway.
Well, that's a popular misconception for people to think that estate planning is just for the wealthy. If you've got a bank account, if you've got a car, if you have any assets whatsoever, right there you have an estate. And I add on top of that, you've also got digital assets. And what I mean by digital assets, it's your email, your online banking, information that you store in the cloud. All of those things are assets as well. Your social media logins. I had a friend of mine who passed away 6 months ago, and a couple of weeks ago, it popped up on Facebook, send her best wishes for her birthday. And clearly that told me that the executor wasn't prepared to shut down the Facebook accounts. So you want to, over and above the assets that you don't think you have and you do have, you've got the digital assets, which you need to shut down. Like I said, the banking, your Netflix, all of those things are those logins and passwords. For every one email address, there's probably about 130 digital identities that are linked to that one email address. And if you think about it, it's probably more than 130. But how can you shut down those logins and passwords if you don't have the access and if you don't know where they're kept? So over and above, the physical assets, the bank accounts, investments, wherever the amount may be, the car, there's still the digital assets that still make up that whole estate.
Yeah. There have been a couple of friends of mine that have passed away that it's like, oh, we get the birthday reminder. It's like, oh, yeah. Which, that can be taken a couple ways, is because, well, aren't we still basically, with this whole process, we're still basically dealing with people's emotions over the fact that they lost someone.
Yeah. It's a tough thing, and that's why in my book, the first chapter, it's not about how to get organized. The first chapter is about grief and how to handle grief. Grief is a hard, difficult emotion, and if you're the executor, you're dealing with the grief of the loss of someone that you love, and then on top of that, you're asked to do these added responsibilities. So the first thing you need to do is make sure that your mental health is taken care of by taking time to grieve. Everybody grieves differently. And I talk about different tactics in the book, and the families are going to grieve differently, different family members. But as the executor, you've got the added responsibility. You need to make sure that your mental health is taken care of so that you can, handle the daunting task of being the executor, to sell the estate as quickly as possible and avoid family fights.
Yeah.
Ooh, that was good.
With that being said, the protecting your own mental health as you're performing these executive duties, was it important to have off on the sideline somewhere a counselor or someone that you can talk to and open up about your own grief?
Absolutely. If you want to make sure that you're getting plenty of sleep, you're eating properly. Mm-hmm. Because the grief will overtake you. So you need to figure out, okay, how am I going to handle it? Some people will end up talking to, a therapist, whether it be on their own or as a family, as a group, to talk to a therapist. But everybody, like I said, everybody handles it differently, and so you've got to focus on, okay, how am I going to handle the grief? Because the grief's not going to. It's not going to go away. It's always going to be there. So at the outset, you need to figure out, how am I going to get through this? Because it's a tidal wave of emotions and loss, and you're going to feel lost. I know in my case, when I lost my parents, I always had, this is how my life is going. And it's pretty straightforward. But once I lost my parents, I was slightly off kilter. I was leaning a little bit more to the left of where I was going in my life, because it doesn't feel the same. And you add on top of that, I'm dealing with that grief. I've also got to deal with an individual where I'm sharing an estate with, that I've got to go to court with. And that's probably, everybody handles grief differently. In my case, I handled the grief and I kept everything inside. So, during the time of the estate battle, I ended up having triple bypass surgery. So, and that's because I kept all the stress inside. and I handled the grief differently. So you have to take care of yourself to get through everything.
Yeah, it's the triple bypass surgery is definitely taking care of yourself.
Yeah, it was in we had a break from court. Our next court date wasn't until January. It was November. Wasn't feeling well. Girlfriend says, "You know what, man? You should just go to the hospital. Just go check." And then they said, "Well, you're not going home." And he said, "You could be, you might, you're on your way to having a heart attack." I said, "I don't think so." He goes, "Well, you are, and we can't let you go home." And 2 days later, I was having triple bypass surgery. So, and all I kept thinking is, I need to get out of hospital because I got to be in court in January. Luckily, the proceedings got pushed another couple of weeks, but I was still on the mend. I was back in court, with as a tune-up in my heart, and was good to go. But I don't recommend doing that for anybody.
Yeah. The triple bypass isn't. It doesn't sound fun, but you're healthy
No,
now, right?
absolutely. I'm healthy enough to be sitting here talking to you about probably something that makes most people uncomfortable to talk about, and that's their taking care of their family and death. So
Yeah,
yes, I'm
yeah,
doing great.
yeah. Because our how our society in general deals with death, is there something different that we could do to make it more of? It's never going to be a welcome topic. That's not going to happen. But to make it a less of a taboo topic to talk about.
Um, since the book came out, and I wrote the book, and then they said, well, people started talking when I would, do a, talking to media like you, I would be found out that I'm in the end of life niche or the end of life world, and I've had that conversation even on my podcast, Executor Help, shameless plug. And what I did was I came to find out that people aren't comfortable with death. They, in the past, it wasn't uncommon that death was, if someone passed away, in the family, it was they were kept in their home, and there was, the visit. There wasn't really the funeral homes like we have today, and people were celebrated, but we got away from that, and we made death something that's dark, and it's something you don't want to talk about, and we all have to embrace it. It's just that how are we going to handle it? And the only part that I'm talking about, and where the angle I'm coming in, talking about the subject, is that you need to prepare yourself to make sure that you don't leave your family disorganized in chaos. And you also have to prepare the one individual that you've asked this big favor to make sure your wishes are going to be looked after and taken care of, and so that whatever you've accumulated in this life and that you want to leave to the next generation, that you've prepared someone to help them pass on to the next generation. So death it's never going to go away. Like you said, it's something we're not going to get away from. But just all you want to do is prepare. And everything that we're talking about here, this is probably the greatest thing of love that you could give your family, probably even more than changing their diapers, is that you've taken the time to make sure that you're not going to leave them disorganized, you're not going to leave them traumatized in the case of an unexpected emergency or if there's a death. You know what? It's no time to find out that there's no will when you're in the ICU. And I can assure you, you can't have a meaningful conversation with any person when they're on a ventilator. So you need to figure out, before those things happen, how can I prepare my family? How can I prepare my executor?
Yeah. Ventilators are rather difficult to talk through.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I wound up talking, having more conversations about death because of volunteer work that I do. But not everybody does that. And then when you tell people, it's like, oh yeah, that you volunteer at hospice. Oh, that's so great that you're helping people be comfortable. They
Yeah.
totally forget about the whole other part that, yeah, why are we making them comfortable?
Yeah.
They
Because everybody's
totally avoid
uncomfortable.
it.
It's
'Cause-
exactly like exactly what we're saying. They want to avoid it. No one wants to think about that. And when you're put into that situation, I mean, you being a hospice volunteer, and I mean, people like you should be lauded and applauded so much for that for this gift of love that you're giving a lot of times to total strangers to make the family feel more comfortable and also to make the patient feel more comfortable because the end is near and you want to make it as easy on them as possible because most times the family is blindsided. They don't know. They don't know from left and right. They don't know from up or down. And all they know is that the person that they love is there and is about to leave them. And again, grief hits people differently and they all react differently. But we also have to remember that this individual has some assets. And there's the business side of being an executor that has to be taken care of, especially if the person that's in hospice or has young children, or they've got young people that need to be taken care of. So there's a lot of dynamics at play when someone's in a situation where they're at a place where you are at.
Yeah. Well, the thing is in that particular situation that they have all these different types of counselors come and talk to the patient. They talk to the family, and they're working hard to prepare and all that kind of stuff. But outside of that, a sudden death or something like that, and it's like, and not only does it leave the family devastated because the person's lost, but then it's like, oh, well, what do I do with all the stuff that's left behind? All the assets that you talked about that are left behind. Now, what do I do with all that? And if we were to have more open conversations about it, would we know better what to do?
Yep. You can have that conversation. If you were to tell your executor or your family, look in that bright red envelope in the filing cabinet. In there, you're going to find the will. You're going to find my funeral arrangements. You're going to find my logins and passwords and any other important pertinent information that's going to help the family. It's also going to help the executor. You want to put it in a bright red envelope. And the reason why I say something in a bright red envelope or bright blue envelope, something that's bright, easy to find, because when there is a death or there is an unexpected emergency, people are traumatized and you can't find anything when you're traumatized. So make it easier on them and say, I was told that if in a case of emergency, just look for that bright red envelope. They see the bright red envelope, so right off the bat, there should be a sense of accomplishment. So you've made it already easier on them. I found what I'm looking for, because they know in there you've prepared for an emergency just like this, that all the paperwork is there. Who should they talk to? Is it, to settle the estate, an accountant, a lawyer, financial advisor. All of those things are in that brightly colored envelope, and you've just made it easier on the family. You made it easier on the executor, because also in there is all the logins and the passwords. Excuse me. You make it difficult on somebody if you can't get into their cell phone, their computer or tablet to just even shut off payments that are going to have to be that they're responsible for. The social media, all of those things. Make it easier on the family. Put it in a brightly colored envelope and let them know where it is.
Yeah.
But I was thinking when we were preparing to have this conversation, you were telling me a little bit about you in terms of being an executor, and maybe you want to talk a little bit
I
about.
was going to say that because you were talking about turning off payments and turning off payments going out and turning off payments that are incoming.
Right.
My as you were saying, my best friend, she passed away suddenly. It was an accident. So, and the person who was supposed to be executor ahead of me, her brother, had passed away in a tragic sudden way also. So it fell on me, and I was like, oh, now what do I do, right?
Right.
And when I'm sitting there talking to I wish I would have known David Edey then, because it may have been a lot easier. But turning off the payments was a daunting. It wasn't as simple as pick up the phone, dial a number, and say, "Hey, so and so has passed away. Here's the account information." No, it wasn't that. It was like they wanted. Well, we need certain forms, and they wanted death certificates, things like that. Well, but and depending on where you're listening to this, death certificates can be attained in different ways depending on the area that you live in. Because the United States is a little bit different for our listeners in the United States. It is a little bit different than Canada is.
Right.
Of how you get the death certificate. But the banks in like Karen was
Well, the banks all have.
and
Right.
they wanted the death certificate, so they knew where they were supposed to be sending the money to. The royalties that came from her books.
Yeah, because every institution has their own protocol. Where you think it would be pretty straightforward, it's like, and every institution that you deal with, you're basically, not basically, you are starting from ground zero. So you're going to have to tell your story again. My friend, my mom, my dad, they are passed away. So it's a constant reminder as you as the executor, sort of a trigger. You got to explain it to them over and over and over again. And then each one of them has their own protocol that they're going to have to follow. And as executor, you need to figure out what are they going to need. Basically, ask that first question. My friend passed away. What is it? I need the account to be shut down. What is it? What information do you need? And then you go on from there. And it's a checklist. Most of them all start with a death certificate. So you're going to need a lot of death certificates, because so you need a lot of copies of those. So each institution, even when it comes to logins and passwords, when it comes to shutting down the account at Facebook, they've got their own protocol. When it comes to Twitter, Instagram, all of those ones, they've all got their own protocol as well. Yeah. So you've got to learn all that. But what makes it easier for you is at least you've got the logins to Twitter, Facebook, Instagram to shut down the account and then follow their protocol.
Yeah.
It's a daunting task. So, but I would ask you the question: when you found out, because it sounds like it went from one person to the other person, and then boom, you became the executor. How did you feel? Well, the first question is, when did you find out, hey, I'm now the executor?
When somebody contacted me and said that they found my friend dead. That's when I found out.
Right.
I was like, or just say that's when when it hit my brain that I probably knew like months before that I was going to be the executor. But that was when it hit my brain, and that's the important part, is when it hits your brain, right? Because you're like, there's an emotional response to that.
And it hit your brain, And did you realize what you're about to get yourself involved with? And did you feel prepared?
Oh, I was lost. I was totally lost. If it hadn't been for the fact that I network with people a lot, so that worked to my advantage because I was able to spread out and get advice back from financial advisors, people who have licenses in financial advising.
Right.
This is what you
Right.
needed to do, and this is how you need to talk to this bank manager. I was like, okay, so they scripted out the conversation for me, what I was supposed to say to him and how I was supposed to respond to questions. Because if you respond the wrong way to questions, it's like, well, yeah, there's a living person on the other end of that conversation, and they may open up or they shut down, and you don't want them to shut down. You want them to remain open, right?
Help you keep the process moving.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I had one bank manager decided that he shut the whole process down.
Wow.
I said something, and I said something to him, and where I live is in a more ritzy part of Vancouver in comparison to where my friend lived, which was a more impoverished part of. And
Right.
and he said, "Well, why am I going to allow you to come in here and take these assets away from my bank?" I was like, I didn't, and simply put, I just looked at him because I didn't think of it that way. I was like, oh, I didn't think I was taking assets away from your bank. I was just figured that the accounts had to be closed.
Well,
And he
first
didn't
off,
like
I
it.
would say, first off, it's not your money. That's where I would start there. From my bank, he doesn't own the bank. He's an employee like the rest of them there. And what he should do is make your job a lot easier to process, to get the money out to the pay the taxes, and then distribute to the beneficiaries. Not about, hey, you're taking the money out of my bank. It's not your bank. You're an employee.
Right.
So I would have stopped him there. But that's the problem with not the problem, but that's the dilemma that most people are stuck with. They have absolutely no idea. This is all overwhelming. And on top of that, you are battling the grief of your good friend.
Mm-hmm.
This is time consuming, and clearly it was probably time consuming, and it took a lot out of you, and you're dealing with the grief of the loss of your friend.
The bank was it's as far as was a non-physical task in comparison to I also had to empty her apartment because the landlord wanted his property back.
Right.
So I had to close out the apartment, and he also wanted rent to be paid for the time that we were still that her stuff was still occupying that apartment. So he wanted money for that. I was like, but I couldn't blame him because that's his business, right?
Again, you're the executor, and you would figure there's going to be some human compassion. And you're the guy saying, well, okay, she's dead, but her stuff is still here on my property. You need to pay for rent. This is not a storage unit. But you're looking at it, well, my friend's dead. Can I have a little compassion? Isn't that right?
Well, he was trying to be compassionate also because she had rented the place for about 26, 27 years. So
Okay.
So he was trying to be compassionate also. But I understood his statement when he said he needed the rent to be paid because he was apologetic about asking for it because he had rented to her for so long, so he had known her, had a personal relationship with her also. So,
Okay.
but
Okay.
it's but in the end, it's
At
like
the end of the day, this is
with people's businesses versus, hey, I got an emotional investment in this. How do we do that?
it's the business side. Like I said before, it's the business side of being an executor. But at the end of the day, these are the trials and the tribulations of being an executor. And until you brought that up, I never even thought of that as an issue. One other job that the executor would have to do. So again, you're battling the grief and loss of your friend, and then you've also got to do the business side of emptying an apartment, dealing with the bank,
Yeah.
and all other issues that, quite frankly, you didn't think or sign on for to be as an executor when you took on the responsibility. That's the question. Having now known what's involved, if your friend was here and she said to you, "Would you be my executor?" What would you say to her today?
I would probably turn her down. Knowing what I know now, I would probably turn her down. Simply because I'd be afraid of letting her down.
All right. But if she prepared you better and you understood what the job entailed, would you have said, is there anything that would make you say yes? And you would know what's involved to be prepared?
Well, yeah. Of course, if somebody said, "Well, no, I have it laid out, so all you have to do is go step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4." Yeah,
Yeah.
So our last conversation was about how we were going to grow our businesses to a point that we could pass on the business to a charity or something like that, so that some sort of legacy lives on through charitable contributions and stuff like that. That was our last conversation. So I knew that if the assets to the money, if there was anything left outside of what was supposed to go to her niece, that it was to go to a charity, and a charity that supports people with disabilities. I knew that. I did know that part, because that was the conversations that we always had. So, but there wasn't that much. There weren't that kind of assets left. She hadn't got that far in her business.
Right. So she was self-employed?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So then, as you as an executor, there wasn't over and above. There was a will, but there was no succession plan. What was going to happen to the business?
No, there was no succession plan.
Okay.
No, she hadn't come up with that that plan yet.
Okay.
And of course we had talked about that we need to find an exit plan for death, and what would that look like? What does the exit plan for death look like for your business?
How did that conversation come up?
Her brother passed away.
Oh, okay.
And she saw how devastated his wife was, and her niece.
Right. Yeah, it's... See, like I said before...
The death conversation killed because of death conversation.
See what I said? The least sexiest topic that you've had on this show.
Yeah. Exactly.
But one of the most important ones.
Yeah. So, just to start wrapping things up, is there like a few really advisable pieces to actually starting that conversation so that people can know what our wishes are after we pass?
Absolutely. Once you've decided, you've met with a lawyer or you decide to do it online, the important thing is that you at least have an estate plan or a will. Majority of Canadians and Americans don't have either. So once you've devised the will and estate plan along with healthcare directives, then you need to, take in consideration who would you want as the executor, having understand that it's a big job and you're asking them to do a big favor. And then what you want to do is prepare them as much as possible for the job. And, like I said, have that bright envelope and have all the important paperwork along with your digital assets and logins and passwords. And then bring it up to the family. It might be, I wouldn't suggest you do it over, Christmas meal or Thanksgiving. By the way, I just had my will done and I've cut some of you here at the table out of, I wouldn't suggest that. What I would suggest is, you at family get-togethers, because it's an ongoing process that you, maybe a day or two later, you're all together, you're sitting around and say, you know what, just want to have a quick conversation. I recently updated my will. I've got my executor. I've talked to them. I let them know that it's in the filing cabinet, the bright red envelope, so they know where everything is. Just want to let you know, why I picked this executor or the two executors. And, I really hope that what I'm leaving to the family members, that it's not going to be a problem, because I hope for the family, all of you will still, get together and love each other and laugh like we are doing right now in case I'm not here. But it's not something that you do once and then you don't bring up again. Over time you have the conversations, or maybe you have to have side conversations with individuals so they don't feel left out, or they felt that there's a reason why you made those decisions. It's an ongoing process, but like I said before, this is the biggest gift of love that you can give to your family, by being prepared for this unexpected emergency or a death.
Yeah. And of course, we need to know the best place to find your book and your podcast. You did mention a podcast. So
yeah, I have a podcast that you can get anywhere where you get podcasts. It's called Executor Help, the Executor Help podcast, like the book, and I have conversations, and I am, hopefully I'm going to have you on the show. And we'll talk, continue this conversation a little bit more about what it meant to be an executor in your life.
We definitely will be scheduling that. So if you're listening to this show and you go to Executor Help and of course search for me, in 2023 you will hear us talking again about what it means to be an executor.
And people can just go to my website, davidedey.com. So it's David, EDEY.com. On there I've got free resources in terms of checklists for the executor that are free to download. I've got excerpts of my book that you can get. I've got what kind of family are you, so you can see what areas you need to have the conversations. And or you can purchase the audio or digital copy of the book or any of the online retailers at my website. Okay.
And that also leads me to there in 2023. It's kind of funny saying 2023 at this point, but you will also hear part B of this conversation where we discuss family types. So as you're having your conversation with your family, you understand how to build that conversation. So yeah. Thank you, David. I look forward to doing a few more interviews and be interviewed myself with you. It'll be fun.
Well, absolutely. Thank you, Michael. Again, I really appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation, the least sexiest one of all that you've had on your show. And we'll do this, absolutely down in the future.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and we'll talk to you later.
Recording stopped.
This show has been produced by Depictions Media. Please contact us at depictions.media for more information.